All right, and with that we have our new version of the website, let's say. So this is how it will look. Thank you again for tuning in to episode 5 of building the OpenSource-Odyssey website. In this video, we will start with branding our website. In the past videos, we have set up our payload project. We did some quality of life improvements. In other words, we got our tools ready, sharpened them up, and made sure we have the right tools for building this ship. In the last video, we threw then out a bunch of stuff that we are not going to use. So we cleaned the house, and in this video we have everything ready and we will actually start painting the walls and moving in. So after completing this video, we will have a website that feels already much more like what we are looking to build. The branding for me is 3 things mainly. One is the color palette, so the different colors we use on a website. Then we have the fonts, which fonts we use for which type of text, for the headlines, for the normal body text. And then of course the logos. So the header logo, the fav icon that you see in the little browser tab, and then also maybe in the admin area. We also want to put our logos there. Our map for this video will be this brand guideline sheet that you see right here. Normally, these guideline sheets are a one-stop shop for looking up information about a particular brand, how to use it, what the logos are, what the colors are, which fonts to use and where, and then some examples of the imagery. So here you can see the primary logo, the logo mark. This should also be on the YouTube channel and the videos, and then the colors. The colors we have picked here are some shades of green. I'm a little bit colorblind. This is mostly dark, but so we have this very nice green terminal looking, almost like neon color, and then a very deep blue that we can use as our secondary color, as well as an off-white and almost black. For the fonts, we have our Huck font. This is one of my favorite fonts of all time, mostly because it's very nice to look at and also it's fully open source. And for a secondary font, we will have Fira Sans. So the primary font will be used in headlines and where we want to get attention. And the secondary font is a little bit easier to read maybe. It's not quite monospace, and we will use it for our body of text if we have a lot of text. So let's say we wanted to start with the color palette. So we need to map these colors somehow into our application. And since we are using ShadCN, as I've discussed in the first video, we have design token mapping. ShadCN by itself already comes with a themes section where we can very easily customize a theme that looks good to us. So for example, here, if we wanted to have a green primary color, it would look like this. Then we can adjust the roundness of the corners. We can toggle light and dark mode. And in the end, when it looks good to us, we can export this piece of code right here. We will put this in our global CSS, and just like that, our application will look like what we have in the examples here. So the first step is to convert our color scheme into these design tokens. And for this, you can use, for example, uicolorful.com. There are many websites like this. And basically what a website like this will do is it will give you an example website that you can start to customize by changing the colors in these different areas here. So if I go like this, for example, you can see the text on the website changes immediately. And so now the first task would be to play around with this here and come up with design tokens that work well for us. Since this is not a design channel, I'm not going to go into the trial and error that went into creating the design tokens. I'm just going to replace what I have in here with the already existing design tokens, and then replace this dark with what we had before here, and then give this a save. So these are my design tokens that I did outside of the video. To start with, I will only support dark theme. So I'm just going to replace whatever is in the root content by what I have in the dark theme section. And now let's give our website a little look. Already, wow, you can see a little bit changed. So we have this green primary color or the green attention color. And if I hover over this button, it turns a little bit darker. Then we have a little search icon here. The input box has this green color to it. And we all did that by just replacing these design tokens in the code. So great, that's the colors already. Now let's move on to the fonts. The fonts, we have two different kinds of fonts that we need to first load into our application and then map so they get used correctly. So for our app to be able to find these fonts, we can put them in the public folder. So let's create a new folder here called fonts. And remember, this public folder is special in web applications. Everything that we put in here will basically statically served to the front end. So we need to find our font files. And luckily, I already have them in a folder. So here I have Huck and Vira. Let's start with Huck. I'm not sure whether I need all of these different variants. So I think I'm going to start with the Huck regular and copy this to my fonts directory, as well as the Vira regular, and copy this as well. So now I have these two files in my fonts directory, and they will be available to my web application underneath /fonts / the file name. So I can come back to my global CSS where we just put our design tokens, and in the add layer base directive, I can now start mapping these fonts that I have available on my web server to certain text. The way this is going to go is with a block that looks like this. So we can declare a font family and then say where this font family can be found. So let's navigate again to the fonts directory and find the names for our fonts. So for example, here would be Vira Sans regular. And that is a TTF file, which is true type. And let's do also the font name in here. Get rid of this URL, copy this block down. And I think I have to get rid of the comma here. Put a semicolon. And this font is called Huck regular. So let's select this and enter Huck. So after loading these font files, what we can do is come into the Tailwind config. And inside of here, we can now map these fonts to certain elements that we may want to use. One example is here in the font family. Here we can also reference the Huck font, for example, now. And enter Huck regular here. And here we are going to enter Vira Sans regular. Let's see if something changed on our website. And you can already tell that the font is changed. Let's find out which one we have. It's a little hard to tell. So here we are using the Vira Sans font. So the Vira Sans font will be the default font that we are using, which is perfect. But we do want to override it in headlines, let's say in H1, H2, and H3 headlines to be using Huck instead. And the way we can do this is by adjusting the typography function also in the extent of our Tailwind config. And for example, here we can say the H1 font family should be equal to Huck regular. And now let's also do this for H2. And so now you can tell that the H2 heading has changed. It went from Vierer to now the Hack font. What we could also do now is play around a little bit. For example, we could add a text transform to uppercase here, which would mean that the headline is always spelled with capital letters. And what we could also change is the font size, for example, to be always 2 rem. And I guess in order for me to test this, I need an actual H1 headline. So let's create this really quick and adjust what we have in our landing page here. So I'm just adding a little H1 here, and maybe we can already see this in the live preview mode. All right, so here we can see how it would look. I think it's a little bit wide, meaning the letters are a little bit spaced apart. So I think this is okay looking. I went with 0 pixels for the letter spacing, and you can also adjust the font weight with bold, for example, here. Let's maybe make the H2 a little bit bigger. So let's say font size 1.8 rem here. And I will remove the margin on the bottom. And then let's also create the H3 and H4. For each of them, I'm just going to adjust the font size a little bit. So make this 1.5 and this 1.2. And of course here H4. And let's quickly add some more headlines so we can actually see what it looks like. So let's give this a reload here. It looks a little bit weird actually. All right. So this is how the headline styling would currently look. I think this margin here is a little bit much. I think I'm going to get rid of the 0.25 underneath the H1. Publish these and let's look at it here again. There's not much difference between the H2 and H3. So I think I need to make this one, let's make it semi-bold. See if it works like this. There must be some additional styling that is already going into it here. H1 base. Okay, now I see. So here we have some more font size styling and it's bumping it up to 2.5. That makes sense. And I'm just going to get rid of this. So here we are styling also in the different viewports. So let's see how it looks in a smaller screen. And then with a bigger screen, the headline also increases in size. So let's make sure that this stays consistent. So here, let's say we want 2.2. So on the small screens, let's do the big screens first. So I will move here the H3 and H4. This will be, let's say, 1.8 and then 1.4. And on the smaller screens, copy this down. So let's make this even 2 then. this is going to be 1.5, and this is just going to be 1.2. And with that, we can also get rid of the font sizes here. They don't take into effect. All right. So with that, when I resize here, the H1 is going to stay big. H2 is a little bit smaller, but bold. I think this is okay for now. I may tweak a little bit later, but for now it's okay. So now to the last part, the logos. For this, I also need to provide them in my public folder. I'm going to create a new folder called logos, and then I will copy them over. So we have the primary logo. Let's copy them over here. And then we have the logo mark. And this is going to have some, actually it's not going to have a name conflict because of the typo here. So let's copy this over, close this upper one, and let's quickly rename them. So we have our primary logo here. And then we have our, let's call it just mark. Let's go with short names. And I guess the first step is then, so we have this fav icon and this website template. We don't need them. Let's get rid of them. And now let's come into our payload config. And inside of here, we want to adjust the icons. So let's look over to the payload config, PayloadCMS docs. So in the payload documentation here in the admin section of our payload config, we have this graphics key where we can provide an icon, the simplified logo used in contexts like the nav component. So it would be right here. So this is the icon. And then we have the logo, which will be used on the login. So let's add here the graphics, and then we have an icon, which is going to be a path, and we will have a logo, which will also be a path. A path to what? We need to now create a React component that does what we want it to do. So let's create a component for our icon and our logo. I will do this in the payload folder since it has to do with payload itself. And we don't have a payload folder. All right, so let's go into the components folder here. And here I see we already have a logo. Maybe let's check this out first. But I think this is our site logo. Yeah, so this is the logo on the site. So I will create a payload folder in here. And in here, let's create an icon TSX. Export default function icon. This doesn't need to receive any props. And all we want to do is return an image that we can get from next image with a source that is pointing to one of the paths we've just imported. So maybe let's go with the primary cobalt for now. So here, let's say logos, mark, cobalt, SVG, give it the fill true and an alt attribute of site logo. Now we go back to the payload config, and here we tell it it will be in components, payload, icon TSX. Let's comment this out for now. This is complaining. It is complaining about what exactly? Graphics does not exist. Okay. Do I need to put it into the components maybe? So here it seems to be the actual location. Now let's regenerate the import map and start the server again. And as you can see, we now have our new site logo at the top, which is our little icon. Great. Now let's do the same thing with the logo. So I'm going to go back to the icon, copy paste all of that, and let's go to logo.tsx, create a new file here, and we'll do the same thing, but instead of the mark, this time we will use the primary. So primary cobalt maybe, and give this a save. Now we need to generate the import map again, and then start our server. And with that, I should be able, oh, did I put it in the payload config? No. I also need to, of course, put it here before I regenerate the import map. Otherwise it will not be picked up. Now the dev server. And as you can see, I mean, the image is there. It's just not positioned the way I would want it to be. So let's try to fix that. So first of all, let's go into the payload logo and give this a div container around here. Oops, div. Give this a class name, and let's say it's going to be a container. Container is a class name that we get, which contains our elements, but it's not really helping. Maybe what we actually need to do is provide a width and height here. So let's go with a width of 300 and a height of auto. Much better. All right, so now we have our admin accessories. Let's say we have our icon in the bar and we have our login logo. What we would want to adjust now is the little fav icon here. And this can also be done through the payload config. So here in this admin section, we can provide the meta icons, which is an array of these little fav icons. Let's come to the payload config and come into meta. Let's fold here. Do we have it yet? No, we don't. So let's put meta icons, which is an array. And then it's an array of these little objects here. So rel, this is an icon. Then we have a URL. I deleted the fav icons here, so let's go with logos mark light green SVG for right now. And then the type is image SVG, I believe. Now let's see if that is working. Refresh here. And just like that, you see we have our fav icon updated also to our little logo here. Amazing. So this is all really well. However, there is still stuff from payload if we go to the front end portal. So in the front end, you can see we have our header still, our header logo. Here we also still have the payload fav icon. And in the footer, we also have the payload logo. So let's also change those out. Let's start with the header. And for this, I'm going to go to the entry point of the header. So this entire component here is declared here in the header component. And we get the header information from our cache and we pass it to the header client. So let's jump into the header client and see what's up here. And so here you can see we are loading in the logo. And if I go to this, it is a boilerplate logo. So let's replace this here with OpenSource-Odyssey logo. And the source we will also replace with one of our sources. So we could go with logos primary underscore light green SVG. And if I now refresh the site, it's already switched out and in the footer as well. So this is quite perfect already. And I think I just want to adjust the size a little bit. So it's a little bit bigger. Let's go to 250. Nothing changes. I guess I also have to increase the height. So nothing is changing still. Maybe this is because of the height here. So let's also go to 50 here. Then 5. Okay, so now it's much bigger, but then it's small again. What if I get rid of this entirely? So now it's way bigger. Does it respect this now? 20? Let's investigate the page and see the container here. So this is the width of full. So maybe if I put this to 40. All right. This is looking much better. And it points us back to the normal website. So to the root. Yeah. And I think that is going to do it. Oh, check this out. So now when I switch the color, it is still doing stuff, and I don't want that. I don't want the thing here to be inverted. So let's get rid of this right here. And I also don't want to have this theme switch at all. So this would be in the footer component. Here we have the theme selector. Let's get rid of this. Get rid of the theme selector and then look for any places in the code that try to import it. Default theme, we're going to hard code this to dark. To dark. And this is going to be next theme, whatever. All right, and then let's come into the commits and commit our changes. So we removed some of the old static assets that we had. So let's get rid of those and include the public folder into our project. So let's say switch out static assets, logos, and fonts. Great. The second thing we did is we adjusted the logos in the header. So here, let's go like this. Then we had our design tokens. We had our theme selector removal. And then we added the new add new fonts to website. Let's go like this. And finally, all right. And with that, we have our new version of the website, let's say. So this is how it will look in the future. We have our toxic green primary color. Then we have our text in the snow, and we have a nice background color. And with that, we are ready to get coding. In the next video, I guess we will start on the database and the schema a little bit to be able to add new types of articles when we are releasing a new video. I hope you're tuning in for the next one. I hope you had fun watching this one, and see you in the next one. Onwards, cypherpunks.